Hi, I'm Tara Benham, National Tax Leader at Grant Thornton. I'm here today with one of our tax partners, Matt MacAdam, and we're going to talk to you about what was in the federal 2021 budget as it relates to kind of some of the COVID measures. There's been a lot of change and programs going on here to stimulate the economy. So, Matt, from our perspective, we're going to talk about CEWS and CERS. Can you tell us high level what those are?
Yeah, certainly, Tara. So thank you for having me. The CEWS and the CERS are two subsidy programs that a lot of Canadians now are fairly familiar with. They're acronyms. They
Mm,
stand for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy. And those were the two largest government support programs to help businesses and organizations through the pandemic. The wage subsidy, which is the oldest of the two, it's been around for a little over a year now. That one is designed to help businesses with their payroll costs. So it is a wage subsidy. Relates to ongoing wage costs that businesses have, and it's really designed to help businesses so that they're not laying off employees. They're able to sustain their payroll over this period despite a revenue decline, which is the measurement for these subsidy programs. And to help with those payroll costs. Its sister is the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy. It was modeled after the wage subsidy, and it came out in the fall of 2020. That one, like the wage subsidy, is based on a decline in revenue. It has the same claim periods and timeframes, but this one is
hmm
instead focused on real property costs. So if an organization rents space, that rent may be eligible for the subsidy. Alternatively, if you don't rent space, you may be able to get a subsidy related to real property costs on property that you own. So those are the two biggest and most fundamental supports that the government has produced. They are fairly complex and can be complex. There are some elections and some strict deadlines in terms of it. So those are the two ones to keep in mind.
Yeah. Well, and the rent subsidy, when you own, you can actually get the subsidy. It's just intuitively not logical. So what we're going to talk about is the extensions that were found in the budget, and that's really what's going to help sustain us for a little bit longer. So what kind of extensions were there?
Yeah, so this is good news for Canadians for sure who are depending on these subsidies to help them. Even though we're kind of hopefully in the tail end of the
Mhm.
pandemic and things are looking a little brighter,
Hopefully.
we do know that businesses are still suffering a bit and need these programs. And the government has recognized that in the budget. What they have provided for is an extension of these two subsidies from June 5th, which was when we knew they were to go to. They're now extended
hmm
an additional 4 claim periods to take them to September 25th. So we know that they will carry the course of the summer, possibly a little bit beyond that into November if the government determines that they're necessary, but we know for sure to September 25th. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that the amount of the subsidy and the threshold for eligibility are changing over the summer in the course of these additional claim periods to reduce the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy. And the eligibility is changing so that in the later claim periods, if you have a revenue decline of less than 10%, you're now ineligible to make a claim. So the government is signaling that these programs, while important, are running their course, and it looks like there's an intention to have these wind down and start to wrap up towards the end of the summer.
And I vote they wrap up at the same time as COVID. As you said, hopefully it's going away. There's been
Yeah.
one other change, and it related to the executive pay in the CEWS program. What was that change?
Yeah, so this one's not applicable to a lot of filers, but it is applicable
hmm
certainly to some of the larger ones. And specifically, it would be publicly listed entities that are filing under the CEWS. What this clawback is it's a new rule that basically looks at executive compensation for these listed
hmm
public entities and compares that compensation to a baseline period of 2019. And if the compensation in calendar 2021 has exceeded the executive compensation for 2019, then there can be a clawback of the wage subsidy Not for any periods claimed up to this point, but from June onward, those CEWS claim periods, there can be a clawback of the subsidy received in those periods.
Makes sense. And we've seen a ton in the media on that one. So it does make sense that we're seeing a little bit more focus on what is the purpose of this. There's been one other program. It's new this time. So why don't you tell us what it is and what's it meant to kind of help us with?
Yeah, the new program that came out, it was announced in this 2021 budget, is a program called the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. So another four-letter acronym, not sure how to pronounce it this time. But this one is also a subsidy program and is also focused on payroll costs. But unlike the CEWS, which is about sustaining existing payroll expenses, this one is focused instead on incremental payroll. So if you have an increase in your payroll for eligible employees on an employee basis, compared to a baseline period, that increment, that increase is eligible for a subsidy of up to 50%. This one is clearly differentiated from the wage subsidy in that this one is really an incentive, I think, for businesses to start to grow their staffing, increase their payroll numbers, and start to drive growth.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, we want to get the economy going again. So, hey, hire new people. From that perspective, hiring new people. So in an example, I've hired some new people, but I have some older employees who I've claimed CEWS on. How do these two programs interplay?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tara. So a couple of things to keep in mind in terms of the new subsidy, the Recovery Hiring Program. The first is that program is only eligible if you are a corporation. It is only available to corporations that are Canadian-controlled private corporations, or CCPCs as they're known in the tax world. Companies that are not Canadian-controlled private corporations, while eligible for the wage subsidy, are not eligible for this new recovery hiring program. If you do have an organization that is eligible for both, so not-for-profit, charity, private Canadian-controlled private corporation, you can only get one of the two subsidies in any given claim period. So a lot of these entities will have to make a determination under both of those programs, which is the most advantageous for them for that claim period, and go with that one.
Sounds a little complex and with a lot of calculations to it. And I think that we've seen that in all of the programs that you've talked about, is they are quite complex. So the final thing that we really wanted to talk about was, it's not in the budget. It was an announcement that the CRA put forward just subsequent to the budget, and it relates to how you might be able to access some of these programs if you've either missed filing or if you've incorrectly filed. So Matt, what does this one look like?
Yeah, this is good news for these organizations as well. And the issue was these programs, while extremely complex, had some very tight deadlines in terms of when they could file, what would happen if you made an error in a filing and you perhaps underclaimed. Unfortunately, prior to now, there was no ability to either late file a claim if you were otherwise eligible, or to increase a claim upwards if the claim period in question was closed. With the April 21st announcement, luckily now there is some condition, or there is some possibility of getting a closed claim period filed. There are restrictions in terms of how that applies, and there is an application process with the CRA to have this done. But the good news is you may still be able to file either an original filing for a closed claim period, or file an increase of claim period, increase the claim for a claim period that's otherwise closed.
Yeah, which you're right, that is great news. Hopefully it's not too restrictive. Time will tell on that front, but it really does hopefully get the funds into the business's hands, which is really what the purpose of the program is. So Matt, thanks for joining me. We had a great discussion today. For more information related to the budget, click on the link below. Thanks.